thing I want to start with. Can you tell a little bit about your background and how you got in cybersecurity?
Sure. So originally I was working in the intelligence field, actually. And the more time I, spent around classified information and kind of what the goal of our operations were, the more I realized that, classified systems were kind of the biggest targets of anything. And then anyone who had placement access to those was a pretty important asset to, target assess or protect whatever we were doing at the time. So kind of when I decided being part of the Intel community was no longer a kind of a thing that aligned with me anymore, that the protection of cyber systems was kind of a natural pivot point. because I kind of saw the growth there, 15 years ago when I was transitioning out.
Hmm. I understand. And what is your current role?
Right now I'm a CISO at tZERO Group in crypto.
Hmm. And before that, can you maybe talk a little bit about your background, kind of progression, your career progression?
Sure. Yeah, sure. So after I got out of the military, I was doing kind of my own business in kind of setting up small business cybersecurity, very basic firewalls, very basic kind of PCI compliance type things for small businesses, and really self-learning, to be honest. And during that time, I went back to school to get my master's.
Hmm.
Took some roles to learn a little bit more about routing and networking with AT&T. Came up as a junior engineer to a senior engineer to a manager, director, VP of engineering at Critical Start before I transitioned over to head of security at tZERO.
I understand. I understand. From what we see and kind of the headlines that we read, it seems like there is a massive shortage of cybersecurity executives. And I think a lot of companies are trying to fill the gaps and not being very successful. And it seems there's kind of a new group of maybe a little bit more junior cybersecurity professionals or even students who are kind of looking into the field. From your vantage point, someone who is in their I guess mid-20s or so, looking to get in the field and looking to get into senior cybersecurity roles, what would be your advice? Like if you were to give yourself an advice when you were like in your 20s, what would it be?
Well, I would have gotten out of Intel sooner. So I would have had started cybersecurity at a younger age, that's for sure. But you're right. We have this kind of shortage of, cyber executives, mid to senior level people, the people that can mentor, the people that can kind of deal with things at a slightly higher level. And then we have a ton of people trying to get into the industry. A lot of people who are, ready to take those entry level jobs, have a lot of, smart kids, ability to learn. They really want to get into it. And the problem is that the entry level jobs are not particularly that abundant right now. It's all, mid to senior level people. And it's basically, I think we had a breakdown in the industry of mentoring, I don't know, 5-10 years ago, where we just didn't really build that kind of middle group that should be mentoring now. So all the people that should be able to kind of bring those new people in and mentor them and get them up to speed pretty quick, they're doing, 2-3 roles. So if you look at some of the job descriptions these days, they want someone who can run GRC and vulnerability management and AppSec and endpoint and SIM. And those typically were several people. And now they want people who can do all that. And there are some people, like myself that have been exposed to all that can do that. But it's taking away my time from mentoring, which is what I should be doing, and helping, being like a force multiplier for new people. So the one thing I think I would tell myself and new people is work on practical skills that you can come in and provide a company like today. So, you've got all these options in training, education. There's all these options out there. People are trying to make money on that just as much as you're trying to learn. And I would ask yourself, what does this qualify me to do when I'm done? And it's hard to answer when you don't know, but look at the course, do some due diligence. Can I actually configure or deploy or change anything in the environment after the course? Or am I just kind of learning, notionally how to do it, or the theory behind doing it, or one open source tool way of doing it that no one really uses in an enterprise environment? And I would try and seek out a couple things that I could tell a company, look, I can solve this problem for you tomorrow, because that's the quickest way someone's going to hire you. So it's whether it's firewalls or endpoint or SIM or whatever it is. Try and get a specific cert that you can show someone. And the cert's a representation of your skills. So the cert's not as important as the skills behind it. But you want to be able to go into an employer and say, you are looking for someone to manage this. I can do that in a production environment.
I see.
And that'll make them feel better, because then someone like me doesn't have to do that task, and I can spend more time mentoring that person, and then we can start backfilling this kind of gap we have.
Makes sense. And you mentioned mentoring. It sounds like for someone who's fairly junior, it would be very important to find a mentor who can kind of guide them and help them make choices, what to focus on and how to structure their time.
Very much so. I think everyone at all levels should have some semblance of a mentor. I was very blessed during my whole career. I've had some very good mentors. Some of my mentors were people who worked for me in some regards. There are some people who are my senior in age that are just technical experts, and they want to stay in that space. And I learned a lot from them. And I think as a leader, you should never really feel like, okay, now I know it all. It's my turn to teach it all. You still have to keep learning. Because A, you have to be able to teach it, or B, there's still things you probably need to learn. But yeah, whether you're starting off, you're in your middle of your career, a mentor can help you kind of navigate those next steps. So I highly recommend it, whether it's formal, informal, try and find someone that you can spend some time with, and even it's just kind of getting, running some things by them, so you can kind of make that next leap.
Makes sense. Makes sense. And kind of in the same vein, an advice for kind of, I guess, your peers, because my understanding that sometimes it can get challenging navigating cybersecurity agendas versus IT, CIO, CTO versus senior leadership, let's say president or CEO versus the board. Do you have any advice on how to make sure that other constituencies and other kind of senior leaders are on the same page and they're aware of kind of the things you're focusing on, make sure that they have your back?
Yeah.
What kind of advice would you give for someone who kind of at CISO level, but maybe struggling with some of those issues?
Sure. Yeah, getting buy-in. I mean, we're a cost center. We don't generate a lot of income, if any, if none really, for a company. So we don't always get the buy-in we want. We complicate things for a lot of business units. So that, a lot of times we're seen as someone who comes in and makes other departments' lives a little bit harder. So I think it's really important to sit down and really understand the business and how you can get security to align with the business. I know that sounds a lot like selling out, maybe. But it's the reality. If the company goes under and doesn't exist, there's no security team anyway. And so if you want to protect the customers, letting the company go out of business doesn't help them either, because they want that product or they want that service. So you really have to sit there and go, how do I align with the company to let it to do what it wants in a secure way? So instead of being what they call the office of no, the answer should be, your job is to figure out how to say yes in a secure, safe way. So whether it's caveats, whether it's conditions, some company says, hey, we want to roll out an app tomorrow. The answer isn't just no, it's not possible. You say, yes, if we can get the whole dev team to work nonstop, and my security team gets in there and we run scans and we shift left and we do it, we secure, you got to have those possibilities. I mean, sure, it's not probable, but you got to try and figure out how to say yes, how to figure out how to do it right, not to say, hey, no, it's not possible. Because if the security team's killing innovation, you're not going to get any buy-in, and you're not going to help your company.
This actually, I think, is an amazing insight. So the answer is not a no, but it's a qualified yes.
It's a qualified yes. Yeah. I mean, it's really your job. That's why you're in that position. So you can figure out how to do it the right way. You have all these tools that you've learned over the years. You should know your stack. You should know what they can do. You should know what your capabilities are. So when someone comes in and say, hey, we have this crazy idea, you go, great, let's hear it. Let's figure it out. How can I make this safe? How can I secure this? New API endpoints, or maybe it's something with the firewall. We change some rules here. We add some, a new different key system. You have to have all those things in the back of your head, figuring out, how do I get to yes on this one? Sometimes it's still not, sometimes you don't get there, but you have to go through that exercise. And when you do, you'll find pretty quickly those teams come to you earlier with these problems, because they know you're actually going to collaborate. You're not going to say, no, we're not going to deal with this.
Exactly. So it's instead of having contradictory agendas, you're actually aligning everyone behind a business goal, but doing it in a secure way. It makes a lot of sense.
Exactly. That's the way I try and look at it. And I don't think I came up with this. It's not a unique idea of mine.
Mm-hmm.
I know a lot of people practice this, but it's definitely something I feel is like misunderstood, at least a lot of times by junior people.
Mm-hmm.
They look at CISOs as someone who's, not making the right decisions and not doing things the most secure way, and, just worried about budgets. And to some degree, there was a generation where the business side was probably pushing the security team over. So there's some truth to that. But I feel like today's CISOs are trying to do it this way. They're trying to insert security where it can be aligned with the business, and get to yes in a secure way.
100%. I understand. Another question that I had. So it seems there is a lot of kind of analysis about what's the most pressing issues now. And I mean, there are Gartner reports and a lot of information about like phishing attacks and ransomware, which is what we have now. But I'm really curious about what you think, what some of the challenges the industry will face, 6 months from now, 12 months from now. So in your view, what would you think would be top 3 most pressing challenges that we will face in 6 to 12 months?
So one thing I think is that, with the economic situation around COVID, where a lot of people are out of work, a lot of people are stuck at home, a lot of people don't have a lot of options, and they're looking to, cybersecurity as maybe being a means of survival, to be honest. And as we said, these new people aren't getting entry-level jobs very easily. It's very easy to look at the red team tools that are all open source. There's free training on it. Anyone can use them, and kind of dabble in the kind of pen test bug bounty side. And that doesn't really make enough money unless you're hired on too. And that's where people are going to start going in the full legal side, in my opinion. So, we've seen breach after breach, O-Day after O-Day. We've had to patch Microsoft 10 times a week. Chrome's getting patched every week. iOS is getting patched every week. People are spending their time poking holes in these things because there's money in it now, and they've got nothing better to do. And we didn't bring them into the InfoSec community like we could have. We could have opened the door and given these people training and brought them over to the blue team and integrated all these really smart people. And really, we didn't open the doors. We did a lot of gatekeeping. We're not opening the doors the way we need to. And so a lot of people are turning to the crime side as a means of survival. So I think as the economy either continues to get worse or doesn't get better, we have to really expect a wave of crime that we're just kind of starting to see kind of crescendo now. I feel like that's going to continue. And I think we're going to see it around application security mainly, because everything is an app these days. Everything, any business has some sort of business application that's web facing. And not enough companies are investing the time and the resources to do shifting left and static analysis in their code. And we have a sea of red teamers, both illegal and legal, just pointing their arrows at it and poking holes in it.
I see.
And I don't.
And is it kind of onshore or from overseas, or both maybe?
It's both. It's both. I mean, I think there's traditionally been a lot of overseas, but we're going to see a rise in just the homegrown versions of it. People call it script kiddies and people that aren't as advanced. But with the commoditization of these tools, they don't have to be as advanced as they used to be to do some real damage. So I think we're going to see it anywhere where there's economic instability. You're going to see this as an option for some people. And unless, we have to kind of face this on multiple fronts. One is from the government has to deal with the kind of economic situation of it, but from our industry's perspective, we really need to be recruiting on the blue team heavily right now. All these really smart young minds that are looking for a job, they're looking for a means to have respect and to grow into something and learn. And instead of closing the door and kind of leaving them to go figure it on their own and turn to kind of crime, we need to bring them in and get them on the blue team and help defend. I mean, even if they're going to be pen testers of the blue team, that's where we need them.
I see. Makes a lot of sense. What are some of the other challenges?
So specifically, I do see ransomware continuing to grow. A lot of companies are spending a lot of time and effort to combat it from a technical perspective. I think from a human perspective, my background in human intelligence, I feel like we're going to start seeing a little bit more insider threat getting involved. We started to see some ransomware gangs actually just offer employees money to, hey, just plant this somewhere where there's no AV, plant this somewhere no one can find it, give us a back door, whatever it is. I feel like that's going to grow. We're already seeing a mostly remote workforce. A lot of people have been hired onto companies where they've never actually maybe met anyone. It's all been remote. The kind of loyalties to companies is probably at an all-time low, and someone's going to come around with a life-changing amount of money, and all you got to do is drop some malware or a backdoor or leave a port open, and someone's going to give you a couple $1 million. And because you've been in the environment and you see that their logging's not good or whatever it is, you can get away with it. People are going to do that. So I see that's a trend. It's not going to be, off the charts huge, but I feel like it's going to grow pretty significantly in that.
And it's one that's not very easy to defend against. It's
Well, it is. It's just not sexy because no one sells a product against it. What you have to do is actually do identity and access management the right way. Because if you were to live in an environment where everyone has access to everything, it's very easy for someone to do something like that. Whereas if you have really strict controls on who can access what, really strict logging around it, really strict situation where the chances of success are actually low, then you actually deter employees from really going there. But if they know that, look, no one's even logging, no one's looking, I can go in and change stuff in production and no one even pays attention. Like if you're in one of those kind of startup-y modes and you haven't really put security in there yet, you can get away with anything. You can build your own backdoors in the code. You can do whatever you want if there's no one watching. So you need to get that framework in there to deter people in the first place. So when they are approached, it isn't even really an option. A, because they don't have the placement access they need, or B, they think that there's something in there that's actually going to kind of bring it back to them.
Right. I mean, they need to know if they do something like this, they will not be able to do it without leaving a footprint.
Yeah, there's going to be logs, there's going to be attribution, their name's going to be on it. As long as that's the case, that's a pretty good deterrence, because a life-changing amount of money if you're in jail does not mean that much. But if there's almost no chance of getting caught because this company has no security and no security team, and it makes good people make bad decisions when they're offered a lot of money and there's very low risk of getting caught.
100%. Especially if they feel they're just getting even with a company that didn't.
Yeah, they're disenfranchised anyway. They're remote. They haven't made any real connections. Maybe they're getting underpaid.
I understand.
Think about how many companies are outsourcing to other countries and just to really pay less. No one really talks about that, but you're really telling some other country like, hey, we're only here because we can get you to do the work for cheaper. And that's not a really great message if you don't really bring them into the fold and make them part of a team and make them feel like they're building something. If you're treating them more like a mercenary, then you're opening and what kind of vetting you're really doing, not a lot of vetting. So you're opening the door to this sort of behavior, into your own environment.
Totally. So that's the second one. What will be the third thing that people wake up to in 12 months?
I still think the social engineering part, because humans are always the weakest link. I think that's always the strongest piece. So phishing may evolve. We'll build tools that detect phishing a little bit better. It'll quarantine the attachments a little bit better, but there'll be different ways to communicate them via Slack, text message, phone calls, different ways to just convince a human that someone on the other side is legitimately asking for something that they can give them. So that's something where, tech is a big part of solving that. Training is another part, but we've been talking about that for years. And I don't think training has ever really put a dent in phishing and the social engineering side. But I definitely see a continued increase in that as, deep fakes and other technologies make it, really hard to tell who's on the other line you're actually dealing with.
Yeah. I actually saw one from AI, which was very convincing, and it was a simulated attack that actually worked.
Yeah. I mean, we tell people, hey, you get an email, we'll call someone up, do a video conference, whatever it is. If you call up a number and let's say you've never actually talked to this person, but that's the number that's listed, and you call them and you've done videos with them and you hear the same voice, or maybe you see the same face or whatever it is, there's not a lot else we're really asking people to do to verify. So I don't think there's a lot of people with the capabilities to do it that well, but that's going to change over time. So
for sure,
we do have to come up with other means to train and kind of have people spot inconsistencies and do some additional vetting, even when their eyes and their ears are telling them, okay, this is someone I've dealt with before.
100%. Will be without kind of, if you prefer, without naming names, what would be the crazy, like in your career, what would be the craziest story, cybersecurity related, that you could share?
So very early in my career, I was at an MSSP as an engineer, and my job was to configure firewalls and to set up VPN tunnels and to do all these kind of engineering configuration setup kind of pieces. And the firewalls were kind of alerting into some SIM that was kind of a makeshift SIM. And I remember one day, and I'd been there, maybe 2-3 months doing, maybe 4 months doing a job. And I asked someone, so who's monitoring all the alerts in the SIM? Because I don't really see anyone in the SOC that does that. And their answer was, well, we're doing that. And I was looking around and I'm like, I don't see anyone doing that. I don't really see any alerts, and I don't really see us telling any customers that this stuff's coming in. And I was really confused that, that they thought that they were really responding. I mean, the company doesn't exist anymore, so it's not a big issue. But basically, this was one of those MSSPs where they were sending a bunch of data to some sinkhole and never telling the customer anything, and not really looking at alerts. And if something bad happened, no one even really knew. And early on, I just assumed there was some whole other team that was responsible for that. And when someone said oh no, we're doing that, I'm thinking well, no one's ever even brought me into the tool. The SIM doesn't even really have any information in it. I don't even think half of the customers are even reporting into it. And I've never seen anyone actually tell a customer anything comes up from this. And unless you physically go into the tool, you don't actually see anything. So this can't be set up very successfully. So yeah, that was one where my heart sank. I'm like, oh, I'm part of a big problem. I'm in a bad place.
Yeah, it's amazing. It's amazing. To your point, that sometimes humans, it could be the best tool, but humans could be the weakest link.
Oh, definitely.
It's knowing something and acting on it could be two different things. That's
Yeah.
awesome. Well, I really appreciate you appreciate sharing your insights, and I also appreciate